Unit 1, Lesson 3, Types of Government. So throughout this lesson, we're going to ask a few simple questions. What is a government? What does a government do? Why do people need a government? Who has authority or power in a government and the various types of government? What is power exactly? And what types of government are there? So the first question, what exactly is government? Well, government is an organization individual people set up to protect the community and to make rules to protect individuals. There's typically a leader or leaders in charge. There are rules or laws that citizens are meant to follow. And the second question, what does a government do? Well, some of you might think a government doesn't do anything. They actually do a lot. They help create laws and guidelines that help protect the community and its citizens. They keep or maintain order and peace. They collect taxes out of everybody who works, so my paycheck, your parents' paychecks. The taxes help take care of things like roads and public buildings, the Postal Service, our national military, and schools. Additional social welfare services that some governments do and others don't are they provide mortgage assistance and energy programs. Governments provide job training and child care vouchers. They set up food banks and disaster relief and education assistance. Most recently, COVID-19 aid. And various governments throughout the world, depending on what type of government it is, provide more or less services than we have here in the United States. Most European countries provide many more services for their citizens that are already built into their tax base. These we consider socialized countries. Canada, Sweden, Vietnam, a lot of Southeast Asian countries, European, Northern European countries, Latin American and South American countries provide national health care, national education, and this basically a standard of living for all of their citizens, whether they're working or not. Those are some of the things that a government can do. Now, question number three, why do people need a government? Well, the chief reason is for protection of people and property. Rules are made within a government structure and government system to help maintain order. And with rules and laws and orders, you need somebody to help enforce those laws to ensure safety. These are all programs run by the government. It also helps to have someone in charge of schools, roads, and the military. Without it, you can see in some countries that have destabilized governments, there's usually complete chaos and disorder, and it's really unsafe for its citizens, especially women and children and the elderly. And for question number four, who has authority or power in a government system, and what exactly is power? Well, each government of each individual country is represented or led by a head of state. This could be called a king or a president or an emperor or a prime minister. How each country chooses or elects their head of state, their representatives, is different. In the United States, we have elections for president every 4 years. This helps us elect our head of state, our chief executive officer. Each leader then has people or assistants who help them. In a representative democracy like the United States, we have members of Congress. Those are elected officials in the House of Representatives and in the United States Senate. Each of them has assistants that work beneath them, just like the president has assistants and a vice president who work with him to help run the government, to help run the country. The same is true in individual states, like California has a governor and a lieutenant governor that are elected. We have state House of Representatives and state senators who are elected by us, the citizens, and each of them have assistants who they appoint to help them run either the state or the national government. We, the citizens, give these individuals power by voting for them. And power is, and we'll talk about that in class. And lastly, what types of governments are there? Well, there's many different forms of governments. We'll cover a few of the more common types of governments, and those are monarchies, an oligarchy system, tyrannical or dictatorships, sometimes called like fascist states, and a democracy and representative republic. And the last one we'll talk about is a theocracy. In a monarchy system, power is in the hands of a king or a queen, an emperor or an empress. The royal family in a monarchy is the ruling position, and it can be passed on to the ruler's children when the sovereign, when the ruler dies. In some traditional monarchies, the monarch has absolute power, the power to instill judges, the power to lead an army, the power to make laws. A constitutional monarchy is a little different. Following the English Revolution, they settled on a constitutional monarchy that has a democratically elected government, like a parliament, that helps limit the monarch's control. The monarch, in this case, the king or queen of Great Britain, is still in effect and it's still passed down through generations of the royal family, but the parliament and the prime minister are the chief governing body of that country. Oligarchy system. Oligarchy means a rule by a few. This is a type of government in which a few people have power, very few within a political group or one social class or one race. Oftentimes they are wealthy. They have a lot of money and have a great controlling interest in maintaining their power. The oligarchs typically care only about themselves. They make decisions to benefit their group and many times are described as making the rich richer and the poor poorer. Though we have a representative democracy in the United States, many complain that our elected officials, our United States senators, our presidential candidates run the country as if it's an oligarchy, that they are maintaining power so they can have power. They're trying to stay within the government so they can continue to hold that power and not relinquish it. Tyranny or a dictatorship. So this is typically when a country is ruled by a single leader known as a tyrant or a dictator. This was the case with the Soviet Union. This was the case with Saudi Arabia. This was the case with Iraq. The leader has not been elected, and they typically use force to take and keep control. The tyrant or dictator has all the power over citizens' lives, and citizens essentially have no choices. They obviously have free will to exercise their choices on a daily basis, but their choices and what they're choosing are so severely limited that it essentially is living under a police state. Some tyrants throughout history have made their supporters happy and helped the poor. They did this so they were not overthrown. They did this so there wasn't a revolt or a rebellion within their country. Others, however, were not so kind, and they ruled with a heavy hand. A theocracy is a form of government in which God, or the gods, depending if it's monotheistic or polytheistic, is the supreme ruler. The leader is thought to serve through his divine right and represent God on earth. The laws often come from the holy books or texts that the religion of the culture follows. Some examples are the Pope in Vatican City for the Roman Catholic Church, and Saudi Arabia is a recent example of an Islamic theocracy where they believe their leader serves by divine right. So now it brings us to a democracy. In a democracy, the government is elected by the people. Everyone who is eligible to vote has a chance to have their say over who runs the country. Now, this is different from governments controlled by a particular social class or group. A democracy is determined either directly or through elected representatives. In a direct democracy, people vote directly on every issue, only practical in a small community. This is used in American cities and counties where we get a referendum, we get a ballot every November to vote on small ordinances. Do we want our property taxes raised? to pay for a new park in South Stockton? Do we want our property taxes raised to build a new fire station in North Stockton by all the new development? Do we want our property taxes raised to help fund schools? Those are small measures. That's a direct democracy where the citizens vote on each individual issue. This was the type of democracy that Athens started nearly 3,000 years ago. It's a representative model that is still followed in many countries. In a representative democracy, however, people are represented by elected officials. They vote for the person they think has similar opinions or similar views as themselves. This is used in large countries like the United States. Citizens have power and choices. In this regard, it's very similar to a republic in that we vote for elected individuals through the House of Representatives to represent our interests. Those individuals then go to Congress and vote on rules that they think we would want them to vote for. So we vote for representatives. The representatives then vote for the laws and make the laws and help establish the rules to follow the laws. That's a representative democracy. And a representative democracy is basically a republic. A republic is a country with elected representatives and an elected head of state who is not a monarch. The head of the country is usually an elected president. Citizens can vote and have voting power. They vote for representatives, like their senators. The senators then help yield the power of the people to make laws, to enact laws and legislation to help rule over the people themselves. One of the very first examples of a republic was Rome's republic some 3,000 years ago. Roman citizens were divided into three classes: patricians, plebeians, and slaves. The plebeians were the lower class, and the patricians were the wealthy upper class. The plebeians, the poor, started a war to demand their voting rights. Other types of governments that we'll not study in depth this year, some of those common ones are, I mean, we talked a little bit about theocracies where priests rule in the name of God, who is the ultimate authority under some sort of religious law. We won't talk too much about anarchies or anarchists, where there's no government, there's disorder. This is usually happens after a government fails. It's called a failed state. When a sovereign state has an uprising from within and the government is toppled in favor of complete anarchy. And communism. Communism, or the state or country owns and operates everything on behalf of the people, and individual people have little to no control over the affairs of their lives. This happens in a communist state. We also won't talk at length too much about socialism and socialist countries or constitutional monarchies.